Welcome everyone. We're going to cover Module 9 this week. It's going to build on last week's discussion on cloud computing and cloud security, in which we talked about pushing our applications, our infrastructure, and perhaps most importantly our data into a publicly accessible cloud. So in Module 9 we're going to cover the Internet of Things, which is also known as IoT. If you're not familiar with the Internet of Things, you're probably familiar with the idea of pushing a lot of everyday devices online. And the way we go about that basically is by attaching different types of sensors to these very commonplace devices. So think of smart cars, smart refrigerators, smart crock pots, and even smart animals, in the sense that we can attach sensors to farm animals to understand their travel, their location, their nutrition levels, and things like that. So there's not much limit to what we can internet enable nowadays. So we're going to talk about some of the security implications of pushing things into the cloud. We're going to talk about some of the underlying technologies that make IoT possible. And we're also going to talk about some of the ways that networks have had to adapt to be able to scale to having billions and billions of devices online at the same time. So hopefully you find the discussion interesting. I think it's a pretty neat topic and pretty relevant nowadays. I'm sure you guys have seen even in your own homes where we used to have 2, 3, maybe 4 devices connected, and now we're seeing 5, 6, 7, 8 or more devices connected is not uncommon at all. So we're going to take a little bit more of a deep dive into IoT, and I hope you enjoy the discussion. So as I said, we're going to continue our discussion from Module 8 this week in Module 9, and we're going to talk about what's known as the Internet of Things. So I talked about it briefly, but the Internet of Things is an interconnected network of web-enabled entities. And web-enabled can mean many, many different things. Basically, it's much easier to do nowadays than it ever has been before. But by attaching specific types of sensors to items that we use every day, we create this atmosphere where devices are always on and we're always able to interact with them no matter where we are geographically. So think of the many different things that can be connected to the web now. We have various types of infrastructure. Lots of industrial and commercial organizations are able to track shipments because of the IoT. Certainly computers, security systems, vehicles, phones, any of a number of household appliances. So I've listed here garage door openers. I talked about farm animals in the intro, things in the healthcare realm, hospital beds, any number of things that are part of our everyday lives can very easily be connected to this network. And we're going to talk about how IoT works, why it's useful, but perhaps most importantly, we're going to talk about some of the security implications that stem from pushing all these things into the publicly available internet. So the IoT basically has this sort of any paradigm, and it's basically anytime, anywhere, anything. So starting from right to left here, anything, I say anything can be connected using various sensors. It doesn't matter what that thing is. As I said, it could be something kind of exotic like an animal. It can be one of a number of things that we interact with daily. Think of your vehicle, anything in your house, things at work. There really is no limit to what we can attach a data generating sensor to and get meaningful results from. So nowadays we basically see the fact that any type of device can be connected to the internet and it is probably somehow useful. Of course, anywhere, the nice thing about being connected to an internet is that you don't have to be in geographical proximity to the device to be able to manage it. So if you're at work and you put a roast in the crock pot in the morning, and you're not able to get home in time to switch the setting from high to low or to warm, right? You can just pull up an app on your phone. You can web directly to it and say, hey, set this from high to low or from low to off or whatever you might need to do. Or as another example, maybe you leave your garage door up in the morning inadvertently, and obviously that's not good. So you just pull up your phone, swipe an app, and make sure that your garage door is closed. And of course, anytime we mean that these devices are always connected, and it wouldn't be much use if they weren't always connected. But along with that comes a number of security implications because, of course, if your garage door is online all the time, it's not only accessible to you, it's accessible to anybody who has access to that network. So definitely huge benefits in terms of any device, anywhere, anytime, but it brings up a whole other host of concerns that we're going to go into a little bit later. And you'll see finally I list on here, what are things? Literally a thing is anything. Can you attach a sensor to it and find some sort of useful information? Then I think it qualifies as a thing that we can put in the IoT. I think a more difficult question to ask is probably what aren't things? So you see in the image there, lamps, certainly smart lights exist. Refrigerators have been web-enabled now for years. Washing machines, you see a fan and sneakers and cars. And you'll see a slide a little bit later that should hopefully convince you that just about everything pretty much in the physical world can be web enabled and we can glean some use from it. So we'll talk about that in the upcoming slides. Okay, so here's a slide. In fact, I thought it would be interesting to take a collection of random devices that I found that are actually cloud enabled and just kind of throw them together on a slide here. So see, definitely it is the fact there's smart egg trays that can report to you when you're out of a dozen eggs. There's smart home locks, and you see these in hotel rooms now where you no longer need the RFID key. You can just use your phone to open your hotel room. Lots of stuff from the kitchen. You see there's a smart toaster oven, there's a smart crock pot, a smart latte machine, smart vents. I think I told you guys I played football in college, so there are sensors and helmets to measure, one, how far you've traveled in a day, and two, the level of impact that you're receiving. So lots of health implications there. And my favorite one that I didn't know existed, if you look in the lower left, there really is a device that can tell you when your cat's litter needs to be changed. I call them, sort of jokingly here, I call them cat poo analytics, but it's a real thing. So it actually checks to see the number of times that your pet steps in and out of their rest area. It tells you the weight differential from when you first filled it. So as it fills up with waste, you can kind of get an idea of when it needs to be changed. And it lights up in different ways. And so quite literally, that is a real internet-connected thing. So hopefully this gives you some appreciation that virtually any device can be connected to the internet, and it's quite simple. And so like I said, basically we need to attach sensors that give us meaningful data about an entity to make it useful in the Internet of Things. And I just want to give you a quick rundown here of some of the sensors that are available. And excuse me, this is by no means an exhaustive list, but I thought I would at least list some of the common ones. And you're probably familiar with a bunch of them, maybe all of them. So I'll let you guys kind of read over this, but there are applications of these sensors that might not always be clear. So in the upper right, you see that there's a pressure sensor. And I say that it's used to measure force, and it can be used in agriculture. So farmers actually installed these sensors in their pipelines, and they were trying to look at how much water was being piped into the agriculture system, but what was the output versus the input. And what they found was, at some point along the pipe path, that they were losing up to 40% of the water that they put into the system, which is of course completely inefficient. So farmers were actually able to diagnose this issue and become more efficient with their water delivery, hence increasing their crop yield, all because of an internet-enabled sensors that literally live inside their pipe system. So there's really huge implications for how powerful these things can be and the analytics and insight that they can deliver. So I thought it would be interesting to kind of see some of the sensors that are used pretty commonly.